The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. A couple stories for you today, a couple of updates, some planning for the week that I will let you know about. Number one, the high school graduation rate in the United States has reached a record high. So we now, in the 2014 to 2015 school year, we saw a record of more than 83% of students getting their diplomas on time, according to federal data that was just released. And what's interesting is that the gains have been seen among numerous sort of factors in terms of how you want to look at it, including race, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, Native Americans, all seeing an increase in graduation rates. Also low-income students, also students with disabilities, those learning English as a second language. And this continues a trend that we saw start back in 2010 when states started reporting these numbers in a sort of uniform and consistent manner. Now, the gaps between student groups continued to close, but they did remain large. So as an example, about 88% of white students graduated on time. That is 10 percentage points higher than Hispanic students at 78%. That is 13 percentage points higher than black students at 75%. So we're still seeing this divide that exists. We still see the divide among and across income groups, which sort of makes a lot of sense. But this is all very good. Now, what's the bad news here? What's the counter to this? Well, it's not so much that there's bad news, but in speaking to a few people that I know that work in education, they said, that this is good, David. More people graduating is good. But what you want to consider is that thing I mentioned about the sort of making uniform and consistent how this is reported. That also coincides with more and more focus on standardized testing, teaching to standardized tests, and using standardized tests as a bigger and bigger factor in determining graduation. So I know you, Pat, probably experienced standardized testing more than I did. It sort of increased over time. I remember the MCAS test here in Massachusetts. When I was in, I believe, 7th or 8th grade, we were the last year that took that test only as a sort of hypothetical evaluative method, and it didn't actually matter for graduation. Now it does matter for graduation. So I think it's important to say it's good if graduation rates go up, but you can attest to how if you're just teaching to standardized tests, that has maybe negative associations that go with it.
Yeah, I grew up on the MCAS system that we have in Massachusetts,
right.
And that was a test that we had to take until we were sophomores in high school. So for me, that was just part of academic life.
No doubt about it. And a lot of people have gotten used to that, including teachers. And there is a lot of debate around whether any metrics that are influenced by or that change as a result of increasing focus on standardized testing, are they really telling us anything objective about whether education is improving in terms of preparation of students for the real world? Or are they telling us that when you focus graduation metrics more on standardized tests and you have teachers being evaluated on how they are teaching to the test and you see graduation rates go up, does that actually tell us anything about education is better? I would argue that it's hard to make that case. Very interesting article from Matthew Taylor. And Matthew Taylor wrote about how, in an interesting way, in the Republican primary, and really now we're seeing in the national election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the Mormon community has been sort of the Christian voice of conscience. And I'll sort of line it up and explain what Matthew Taylor is talking about. When we were looking at the Republican primary, it was interesting that in spite of being the exact opposite of what we would think of as the ideal evangelical candidate, Donald Trump garnered a plurality, not a majority, but a plurality of the evangelical support, outdoing even Ted Cruz, who was in second place among evangelicals. As high as 78% of evangelicals at one point were supporting Donald Trump. That has decreased slightly to about 2/3, about 67%. But Mormon voters have absolutely run away from Donald Trump, and it does make perfect sense. And to be perfectly clear, evangelical voters also should be running away from Donald Trump, but they seem to have decided that, I guess, keeping a Democrat out of the White House, I guess keeping Hillary Clinton specifically out of the White House is super important. And they are staying with Donald Trump in a way that Mormons are saying, listen, it's not about we love Hillary. This is about the fact that Donald Trump represents everything that we should be ashamed of. And you sort of have to hand it to the Mormons, Pat, because they are voting their conscience.
And wouldn't it be amazing, too, if Utah, which has, of course, a very heavy Mormon population, went to someone like Hillary Clinton or even Evan McMullin or Gary Johnson?
It's fascinating because if you look at the polling there, partially because of Evan McMullin, partially because Libertarian Gary Johnson is popular in Utah, Utah is not a foregone conclusion for Donald Trump. It's still more than 50% likely that Trump will win, but he's not going to win by that much in Utah if state polling can be trusted. Utah is one of the most red states every single election, and the idea that Trump could even have some trouble is stunning, and it really tells us a lot about the Mormon vote. And if you listen to this show, it's not a show where we praise Mormons that often, right? In fact, we usually talk about how it's a cult based on a scam, but credit where credit is due. They're saying Trump doesn't represent our values, and so we're not going to vote for him. And I think that's great.
I agree. It seems like evangelicals are trying to give him a pass for the things that he said. Mormons aren't having any of it.
No.
And yet in 2012, it was the most overwhelming red state, in part because Mitt Romney himself was a Mormon.
And I think a lot of them are probably listening to Romney say Trump's a disaster, right? I mean, I think Mitt Romney has huge influence in the Mormon community.
Of course, yeah, and there's so much anti-Trump sentiment even among establishment Republicans now.
Yeah, we've seen Romney. I wouldn't. Romney is Mormon, so there's an obvious line to say, well, Romney doesn't like Trump, so Mormons don't like Trump. But my sense is that Mormons also respect sort of more moderate and sane Republicans like John McCain. And when John McCain is even saying, I can't vote for the guy, and Cindy's not voting for him, we're not voting for Hillary, but we're certainly not voting for Trump, I think Mormons are actually listening to that. Okay, a few updates. Number one, the calendar is done. The 2017 calendar is done. I've ordered a sort of sample copy so I can have it physically here in the studio to review it, to make sure it's the same great quality that we've seen over the last couple of years. It is going to be, if you want the 2017 David Pakman Show calendar just as a calendar, right? That's great. It's going to be made up of a number of different cartoons done by artist Dan Burke, all sort of arranged and designed by Anthony Petramala, who has helped us with the calendar now 3 years running. It's going to be fantastic. That I can assure you, okay, to take a page out of Donald Trump's phraseology. If you like the idea of an adult coloring book, 90% of the cartoons, the comic strips that are making up this calendar are black and white, and they would make a perfect and hilarious adult coloring book. And if you want both, if you want to use it as a coloring book, but then also put it up on the wall as your calendar, then it's going to work for both, and it's going to be really, really cool. Now, I do have one sad thing to tell you. There are cartoons which include me. There are cartoons which include former producer Lewis. There are cartoons which even include Rachel. But because of the timing of this calendar, there are no Patrick Ford cartoons in this calendar. And I don't want you to be upset, Pat. It's not a slight to you. It's just that the cartoons were done before you joined us. And it is by no means an offense. I don't want you taking offense. I don't want the audience taking offense, etc.
Yeah, I'm going to have to understand that. But I would hope by the 2018 calendar year, there'll be some comic strips with me in it.
Believe me, I've had a conversation with Dan Burke already, and I've said we have to have Patrick Ford material on the 2018 calendar if we choose to go in this direction. And it's also not just David Pakman Show people. You will see that presidential candidates make appearances. There are really good cartoons of Trump, of Hillary Clinton. Dan Burke's art is really fantastic, and he captures, and you'll see this, the little facial expressions and hand motions of the candidates and of all the different people that are in there really, really well. So later this week, I'll have a couple of preview images for you. And then hopefully we will be able to turn on the ordering system early next week. I'm hoping we'll still have plenty of time to get these to you in time for January of 2017. Last thing. Okay. People know that I am flying to Las Vegas tomorrow, where I will be broadcasting from the rest of the week. People also know that on the flight back from my trip to Italy 3 weeks ago, I fainted. It was a whole to-do. I told the story. I've gone through rigorous medical testing. I've had an electrocardiogram. I've had an echocardiogram of my heart. I've had a number of blood tests to ensure that I am not diabetic, that my, potassium and what potassium and what's the name for all of those?
Like micronutrient, like nutrients?
No, what's the word? I can't believe I'm forgetting it. In any case, the things, the salt and potassium, what's the word I'm looking for here? Anyway, I'm forgetting it. In any case, that all of that is good. And all of that is absolutely fine, but I am now wearing, and I can't really show it to you, I have to carry around a heart monitor, which is attached to me, and then also this extra cell phone, which just transmits data back so they can monitor whether I have some kind of a heart issue. Now, every indication is that this is just protocol, that I'm fine. This would be incredibly unlikely, but we want to rule it out. But it is a huge, huge pain in the ass. I'm not going to lie. 30 days I've been asked to wear this thing. And because of how I am, Pat, in terms of, I'm very suggestible and I've been feeling great. I get the heart monitor. All of a sudden I'm saying, did I just have a little flutter? Did I just have a palpitation? Yeah. I'm kind of sweating. I think, oh boy. And then you look at the thing and of course it's monitoring and sending data all the time. You don't know why. And I see lights blinking and I say, oh boy, that's not a good sign. So I'm hoping everything's fine. I've been told this is just a precaution. It's not common that people have this issue. But if I told you that I was feeling great about getting on this flight with a heart monitor tomorrow, it's a conversation with TSA number one, which isn't going to be truly exciting. And then just knowing that all this is going on, it's not the best, but in all likelihood, I'm hoping I will arrive in Las Vegas and be able to broadcast. I don't know if you're suggestible in this way. As soon as someone tells me the symptoms to a condition, immediately I start thinking, I think I have some of those.
Well, it's placebo effect for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I would not want to carry that thing around with me. That thing looks awfully bulky.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine like going running or something with that on.
I went running yesterday because I've been told, don't curtail your activity. We're not telling you shouldn't fly. We're not telling you shouldn't run. Yeah, if you go swimming, you want to take the thing off because you don't want to soak it. So I did go running with it, and it's not that comfortable. I mean, it was okay, and I felt fine with the running, but I don't know. It's not the most comfortable thing, and we'll see. My plan is, and I don't know if the doctor is going to love this, if I get through 12 or 14 days and a couple of flights with this thing and everything's fine, I'm going to call and say, listen, this thing is a huge pain. How's the data looking? How much more are we going to get from another 2 weeks? And sort of see what they say. They told me if I refused this thing, they wouldn't have given it to me, but that protocol is to give it to me. And I would sort of feel not good about telling the doctor, I don't want to do what the protocol is,
Yeah, it's a sticky situation, but let's just hope you don't have a fainting incident while swimming, because then we won't know the cause of it.
We won't know what it is that's going on, yeah. So, okay, that's what it is. That's what's going on. And if all goes well, tomorrow we will have Ben Dixon here in studio. Pat will be producing. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I plan to join you from Las Vegas.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.